Alden, does your wife know you're here? Lena's voice dances in the breeze, playful and unbothered, as she leans over the railing of the rooftop terrace. The sunset casts golden ribbons across her hair, and I watch them sway, careless, alive. Like her. I take a sip of my drink before answering. Come. Even. It was her idea. Lena lifts an eyebrow, intrigued. Seriously. I nod. She laughs, but I don't. Behind her laugh, I can sense it, the question that never really gets asked out loud. What kind of woman sends her husband to someone else's bed? And maybe the more disturbing one, what kind of man agrees? But I'm not disturbed. Not anymore. I watch her turn back toward the skyline, unfazed, while the city pulses below us. And in that silence, that space between question and answer, I realize just how far I've drifted from the man I used to be. Because this moment, this place, this woman, it isn't betrayal. It's aftermath. The explosion already happened. The smoke has cleared. All that's left now is the wreckage. And me, standing in it, not trying to rebuild, just finally breathing in the open air. There was a time not long ago when I would have flinched at a question like that. When I would have felt the shame coil inside my chest like a wire tightening around my ribs. When I would have rushed to defend Isla, my wife, the woman I'd once given everything to. But that Alden, he's gone. Died quietly somewhere between her suggestion at dinner and the moment I said, okay. Lena doesn't know the full story. She doesn't know the way Isla had looked across the table that night, fork poised above her salad, and casually asked, what if we open things up a little? As if she were suggesting Thai instead of Italian. She doesn't know the way I'd smiled back and said, sure, with a voice that didn't even sound like my own, like something inside me had clicked, like a switch I didn't realize existed had flipped. Lena doesn't know. And for now, I like it that way. Because the version of me that she sees, the one who leans easily against the terrace railing, who smiles without guilt, who talks like he's not unraveling, that man is new. And maybe, just maybe, he's not pretending anymore. I glance sideways at her again. She's talking about the view now, something about how the city looks better when you're high up, when everything and everyone is small, far away. Her words float around me like music. But I'm not really listening. I'm remembering. Remembering the sound Isla made when she poured the wine that night, like she was announcing something elegant and final. The glint in her eyes that told me she wasn't testing me, not this time. She'd already made up her mind. And maybe that's why I said yes. Because I was done taking exams in a marriage that felt more like a job interview than a partnership. I was tired of sitting across the table from a woman who smiled like she already knew the ending to a story I was still trying to write. So now here I am, on a terrace I don't own, with a woman I shouldn't be with, in a life I didn't see coming. And the strangest part? I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like I'm cheating. Because I'm not. She let me go. She didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't fight for me. She simply handed me a hall pass, dressed it up in empowerment, and called it freedom. But what she really gave me was permission to stop trying. Lena finally turns toward me, her lips curved into a half-smile. You know, you don't talk much. Not like most men I meet. I meet her gaze, holding it this time. Most men you meet haven't been gutted and stitched back together. Her smile falters, not in discomfort, but curiosity. She steps a little closer. Who did the stitching? I laugh once, quietly. Still figuring that out. And just like that, the wind shifts. The moment passes. But something's been set in motion. Something irreversible. Because I'm not the man who gets walked over anymore. I'm not the one who waits for permission. Not from Isla. Not from the past. Not even from myself. The rules changed. And for the first time in a long, long while, I'm not just reacting to the storm. I am the storm. Before everything cracked, before the quiet unraveling in the rooftop nights, we looked like the perfect couple from the outside. Alden and Isla, the dependable husband and the driven wife. Neighbors waved at us like we were something to aspire to. Friends always said we balanced each other out. And in a way, maybe we did. She was the fire. I was the stone. Isla was sharp in every room she entered, crisp blazers, clean lines, eyes that seemed to assess and file everything into neat little categories. She knew what she wanted from life, and most days, it felt like I was just one more item checked off her list. Married. Stable. Homeowner. Done. I didn't mind at first. In fact, I admired her. She had a strength I lacked, the kind that walks into a meeting and doesn't blink when someone tries to challenge her. The kind that never second-guessed a decision once it was made. She climbed her way into management while I stayed content in my role at the architecture firm, sketching blueprints in quiet rooms, headphones in, avoiding office politics whenever I could. We used to joke about it. How I could spend a whole Saturday in the garage sanding down an old chair and feel like I'd accomplished something big, while she couldn't sit still for 10 minutes without refreshing her inbox. We laughed, we fit, we made sense. But over time, what made us work became what made us stuck. I started to realize that my calm wasn't calming to her anymore. It was irritating. My silence wasn't thoughtful, it was passive. My steadiness, boring. Isla didn't yell. She wasn't cruel. That would have been easier, maybe. No, she just led. And I followed. At first willingly. Then out of habit. Then because I didn't even notice it was happening. She picked the restaurants. The vacations. The color of the curtains in our bedroom. I nodded, smiled, handed over the credit card. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was just easygoing, flexible. That letting her lead was love. But truthfully, I was disappearing in increments. I remember one night in particular. She had come home late, kicked off her heels, and started venting about someone on her team missing a deadline. I sat on the couch, nodding at the right moments, offering a few sympathetic ahs here and there. Halfway through her rant, she looked at me and said, "Do you even have an opinion?" I blinked, caught off guard. "About your coworker?" "No," she snapped. "About anything." It was a jab, not loud, not mean, but it cut deep anyway. I didn't have an answer. Not a real one. I couldn't remember the last time I'd challenged her on something. Or even just said, "No, I'd rather not." Somewhere along the line, I had learned that agreeing was easier than resisting. That peace was more valuable than truth. And Isla had learned that control wasn't something she had to fight for anymore, it was just given to her. Our marriage became a two-person company, with one CEO and one silent shareholder. I wasn't unhappy, not exactly. Just muted. Like living in grayscale while she operated in full color. She'd tell people how lucky she was to have a husband who never complained. "Alden's just so steady," she'd say with a smile, and everyone would nod approvingly, but inside, I was shrinking. At dinner parties, she always led the conversation. I'd smile, refill her wine, chuckle when prompted. People liked me. I was polite, quiet, non-threatening. A supportive presence. And that was the role I'd built my life around, the men behind the curtain. Not the lead. Not even a strong supporting role. Just the guy holding the light steady so she could shine. Looking back, I don't even think she did it maliciously. Isla never once said, "Be less." She didn't have to. I did it on my own. Over time, I stopped taking up space. Stopped asserting what I wanted. Stopped making noise. Because noise got in her way. So I became quiet. Not in the way that brings peace, but in the way that slowly erases a person. And the worst part, I didn't notice it happening until it was too late. Until the night she suggested we open the marriage. And I said yes. Not because I wanted to, but because I had forgotten how to say no. We were at our usual spot, a low-lit restaurant tucked behind a bookstore on Montrose. The kind of place where they knew us by name, brought out Isla's favorite red without asking, and always seemed to play the right kind of jazz. Comfortable. Predictable. Like us. The night had started like so many others. We made small talk over appetizers, mostly about her day, a new hire she wasn't thrilled about, some investor meeting that went sideways before she turned it around. I offered a few thoughtful nods, even made her laugh once. It felt normal. But then dessert came. And she said it like she was offering me a bite of her creme brulee. "What if we open things up?" The words floated across the table and hung in the air, weightless but sharp. I blinked once, twice, thinking maybe I'd misheard her. "Sorry." She didn't hesitate. Explored things. With other people. Just to see. "I think it could be good for us." She said it so gently, like she was proposing we try a new vacation spot. Her fork tapped against the ceramic as she scooped a piece of caramelized sugar, completely unfazed. I stared at her, waiting for a grin, some wink of irony. Nothing. She was serious. My first instinct was to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so wildly out of step with the moment, with the setting, with the ease of her tone, with us. But I didn't laugh. Instead, I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't nervous. Not anxious. If anything, she seemed curious. Like she was testing a theory, and I was the first variable. I felt something shift in my chest, a slow grinding like tectonic plates deep under the surface. But on the outside, I stayed still. "How long have you been thinking about this?" I asked. She shrugged. "A while, I guess. It's not that I'm unhappy. I just think we've plateaued. Emotionally. Physically. It's like we've read this book cover to cover a dozen times. Maybe it's time to read something new. I should have been furious. Or wounded. Or something. But all I felt was this eerie sense of watching it happen from the outside, like I was an actor in someone else's scene. I set my fork down slowly, carefully. Are you asking for permission? She raised an eyebrow, amused. No. I'm asking for partnership. I want us to be on the same page. Same page. Like this was some mutual decision we were reaching together, not a verdict already handed down. I thought about all the years we'd been married. The compromises. The quiet sacrifices. The endless nights of going along with things I didn't fully understand just to keep the peace. And then, without quite knowing why, I nodded. Okay. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. Okay. Yeah, I said, voice calm. Let's do it. Even I didn't expect those words to come out of my mouth, but the moment they did, I saw something flicker behind her eyes, confusion, maybe, or disappointment. Like she'd been expecting a fight, a refusal, a reason to prove me small, fragile, unevolved. Instead, I gave her nothing. That unsettled her more than a scream ever could. She smiled, tried to keep her composure. Well, that was easier than I thought. But I knew her too well. I could see the gears turning behind that smile. She didn't know what to make of my agreement. I'd just taken the script she handed me and read it without flinching, and that threw her. As we left the restaurant, I walked a step behind her, watching the way she moved, confident, poised, in control. But something inside me had cracked. Not a breakdown. Not a betrayal. Just a realization. She expected me to crumble, to beg, to resist. Instead, I nodded. And in that moment, something in me clicked into place. Something quiet. Something dangerous. Not anger. Not revenge. Clarity. This wasn't about freedom or adventure. It wasn't even about desire. It was about control. And for the first time in our marriage, Isla didn't have all of it. She offered me a leash disguised as liberty, and I took it, not to be led, but to unhook myself from the collar. I didn't change overnight. There was no sudden transformation, no grand announcement. But something in me began to move, subtle at first, like a thaw beneath the ice. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. My old gray t-shirt looked tired, clinging to a body that had long since settled into routine. I didn't hate what I saw, but I didn't recognize it either. So I changed it. I joined a gym that week. Not one of those flashy, influencer-filled ones. Just a place tucked behind a laundromat on Lincoln Avenue, where people came to sweat and leave quietly. It suited me. I didn't want attention. I wanted clarity. I started going every morning before work. At first, I could barely do 15 minutes on the treadmill without gasping. But I kept showing up. Not to punish myself. Not even to impress anyone. Just to feel something again, to rebuild from the inside out. Funny thing was, Isla barely noticed. Or maybe she did, but didn't want to ask why. She was busy now, frequent late nights, new friends, glowing text notifications she kept face down on the table. Her eyes flickered toward me less and less, as if I were slowly blending into the furniture. And I let her. Because I wasn't there to be watched anymore. I was there to watch myself become something new. The changes were small at first. I updated my wardrobe, simple stuff, better jeans, fitted shirts, a jacket that actually made me feel like I had a spine. I started listening to music I used to love, music she always found too melancholy, but which somehow made the city feel like it had a pulse again. And then one evening, everything shifted. I was leaving the gym, towel slung over my shoulder, earbuds in, when I saw her. She was standing by the juice bar just outside, flipping through her phone with one hand, holding a smoothie in the other. Familiar, but I couldn't place her at first. It was only when she looked up and saw me that recognition lit her face. Mr. Reeves. I pulled out an earbud. Yeah. Her smile widened. It's Lila. I mean, Lena. Back in the day, I took your wife's literature seminar at the university. I blinked. That's where I knew her from. Years ago. Isla had come home more than once venting about her, a disengaged, underwhelming student who didn't push herself. You've changed, she said, studying me. In a good way. I laughed lightly. That makes two of us. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing flirtatious, just warm, easy. She told me she'd left academia, now worked at a nonprofit downtown. Less theory, more impact, she said with a grin. There was something about her, genuine, grounded. She wasn't trying to impress me, and I wasn't trying to be impressive. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small or muted. I just felt seen. We parted with nothing more than a "see you around," but that night, something stirred deep inside me. It wasn't desire. Not yet. It was possibility. That's when I realized, this open marriage she'd proposed wasn't a trap, it was a door. One she expected me to peek through and retreat. She never imagined I'd step through it and start building a life outside the one she curated for me. And each day that followed, I did just that. I took walks alone. Not out of sadness, but to listen to my thoughts again. I signed up for a woodworking class on Sundays. Isla rolled her eyes when I told her, said something about it being such a midlife cliché. I didn't respond. Let her have her sarcasm. I had my peace. I saw Lena again a week later. This time, at a bookstore downtown. She was tucked into an armchair with a novel in her lap, legs crossed, completely immersed. I didn't interrupt her. I just stood there for a moment, watching someone who looked at the world with curiosity instead of criticism. Someone Isla had once dismissed as forgettable. And maybe that's what struck me the most. Because in the quiet of that bookstore, surrounded by rows of unread stories, I realized, I don't want to be someone else's forgettable chapter. I want to be the one who picks up the pen and writes his own ending. It happened on a Sunday morning. The air was still, thick with late summer heat, the kind that pressed against the windows and made the whole apartment feel too quiet, too heavy. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, the way I always did, same mug, same routine, same silence between us. Isla was on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, scrolling through her phone. She looked relaxed. Pleased, even. And for once, I didn't care why. I was halfway through pouring the coffee when her voice broke the silence. Who's Lena? I didn't flinch. I set the kettle down gently, picked up my mug, and turned to face her. Someone I ran into at the gym. Her eyes were on me now, sharp and searching. You mentioned her again last night. Said she recommended that place on Clark. She did, I said calmly. We've grabbed a coffee a few times. The room didn't explode. It cracked, slowly, almost imperceptibly. Like an old building settling under the weight of too many winters. Isla straightened. So, you're seeing her? I didn't answer right away. I took a sip of my coffee instead, let the warmth settle the storm that wanted to rise in my chest. Then I looked her in the eye and said, "You're the one who said we should open things up." And just like that, her composure slipped. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to argue but hadn't prepared for this version of the script. She blinked, sat back, and tried to collect herself, folding her arms across her chest like armor. "That's not what I meant," she said, voice tight. "No," I asked. "You didn't mean it when you said we should explore? That it could be good for us? I thought that was the deal." She stood up, pacing now. "That's not what this is. I didn't mean you should date someone. Not like this." I stayed seated, still, watching her unravel in real time. "So what did you mean, Isla?" I asked, more gently than she deserved. "That you could go out and feel something new while I stayed here waiting. That this was freedom for you and permission for me to exist quietly on the sidelines. You're twisting it." "No. I'm just finally reading the fine print." Her cheeks flushed. Not with embarrassment, anger, or maybe fear. Because for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't arguing. I wasn't defending myself. I wasn't raising my voice or retreating into silence. I was just calm. And she hated it. "Lena's a child," she said suddenly, reaching for something sharp. "You do realize that, right? She was one of my students. She's barely out of college. She's 26, I replied. She's also kind. She listens. And she doesn't make me feel like a passenger in my own life." That hit its mark. I saw her flinch, even as she turned away. "You're doing this to hurt me," she said, her voice quieter now. "To get back at me." "No," I said, setting my mug down. "I'm doing this because I finally realized I don't owe you my silence." The silence that followed was thick and electric. She turned back to me, eyes glinting with something bitter, maybe even betrayed. "I can't believe you're choosing her over me." I didn't answer right away. Because that was the moment I realized she truly believed this was still a competition she could win. That after everything, she could still summon me back into place with just the right look, the right line. But I wasn't playing her game anymore. "I'm not choosing her over you," I said. "I'm choosing me. Maybe for the first time." That's when she snapped. She launched into a tirade, half scorn, half confusion. Accused me of being petty, impulsive, said Lena was just a rebound, a phase, an ego trip. She brought up all the ways I'd drifted from her over the years, as if my silence had been a weapon instead of a survival tactic. Every word she threw felt like it was meant to push me back into my old shape, the agreeable husband, the easy one, the quiet shadow behind her spotlight. But I didn't move. I didn't fight. And that was what really undid her. Because Isla had always known how to manage conflict, how to spin it, lead it, end it on her terms. But now, she was flailing. And all I did was sit there, watching the mask she'd worn for years slip, piece by piece. And then came the part that almost made me laugh, if it hadn't been so revealing. I had one dinner, she said, her voice rising. One. And it didn't even mean anything. You can't use that as an excuse to run off with some girl who admires you. I tilted my head. So you're allowed to explore without consequence, but I'm not allowed to be admired. Her mouth opened, closed. She had no answer for that. Because this was never about exploration or honesty or even desire. It was about hierarchy, and now, it was collapsing. You're different, she whispered finally. I don't even know who you are right now. I stood up, not out of anger, just resolve. I looked her in the eye, and I told her the truth. I'm the same man I've always been. You just stopped noticing. And with that, I left her standing in the kitchen, surrounded by the quiet she'd once used like a weapon. Only now, that silence didn't belong to her anymore. It was mine. After the explosion in the kitchen, the house didn't go silent. It went hollow. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, it echoes. I could hear every creak in the floorboards, every breath she took in the next room, every drawer she opened with just a little too much force. We didn't speak for days. And strangely, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't scanning her moods or holding my breath through the tension. I wasn't measuring my words, second-guessing my instincts, or trying to solve some invisible puzzle she hadn't asked me to finish. I was just existing, fully, finally. That week, I saw Lena again. We met for lunch at a quiet Thai place a few blocks from her office. She arrived with wet hair from the rain, cheeks flushed, not wearing makeup, not trying to be impressive. Just herself. She smiled when she saw me. Not politely. Not performatively. Just, sincerely. How's your week been? She asked, settling into the booth across from me. I considered lying. Saying fine, brushing it off like I always had. But something about Lena made it hard to hide. Maybe because she didn't look at me like I was a problem to solve, or a disappointment to manage. She looked at me like a human being with a story worth listening to. Complicated, I admitted. She didn't press. Just nodded and waited. And I found myself telling her more than I meant to. About the Cold War at home, the way Isla's voice had started sounding like a stranger's, the aching awareness that the life I'd spent years building might have never really been mine. Lena didn't flinch. She didn't give advice or try to fix it. She just listened. That's what I remember most. Later, as we walked back to her office, we paused under the awning of an old bookstore, escaping a sudden burst of rain. She looked up at me and said, "You know, it's okay if you're not trying to win anything right now." I blinked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you don't have to prove you're over her. Or stronger. Or healed. You're not in a competition. You're just in your life. That's enough." It was such a simple thing to say. But it cracked something open in me. Because for weeks, I'd been wondering what she thought of me, if she pitied me, admired me, saw me as some fragile man on the rebound. But Lena didn't see me as a reaction to someone else's choices. She just saw me. We hugged before parting, and it was the kind of hug that doesn't ask for anything. No heat, no expectation. Just connection. A gentle acknowledgement. I see you. I hear you. You're allowed to be whole again. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I walked the city until my feet hurt. Past familiar corners that now felt different. Past shops Isla and I used to visit. Past the bench near the lake where we once talked about names for children we never had. And I didn't feel angry. Just free. That night, I made myself dinner. For once, not for her, not to keep a routine alive. Just for me. I poured a glass of wine and sat at the table alone. And you know what? It didn't feel lonely. It felt like arrival. Isla came home late. She didn't speak when she passed me. Just gave me a sideways glance, surprised maybe, that I wasn't waiting for her. That I wasn't pacing or pressing for answers or scanning her for signs of guilt. I didn't even ask where she'd been. I didn't want to know. Because whatever or whoever she was chasing now, it wasn't my burden to carry. And the weight of that realization was so light, it almost lifted me out of my chair. Later, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time I'd been truly happy. Not content. Not safe. Happy. And I couldn't. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore. Because happiness wasn't something I was waiting for now. It was something I was building. Quietly. Grittily. One brick at a time. It wasn't about Lena, not really. She wasn't the answer. She was a mirror. A reminder that I was still someone worth loving. Worth hearing. Worth choosing. And that realization. That was the real turning point. Because I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't trying to make Isla jealous or win back my dignity. I was just trying to remember what it felt like to belong to myself again. And this time, I wasn't letting go. I don't know how she found out. Whether it was someone from the university gossiping, a photo someone tagged online, or maybe she just put the pieces together on her own. Isla always had a sixth sense for power dynamics, especially when she no longer held the upper hand. All I know is, one evening she came home early. No warning. No message. I was in the kitchen, washing up after a run to the market, humming to myself without realizing it. It wasn't until I heard the keys hit the counter that I turned and saw her standing there, coat still on, face unreadable. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Or maybe like she was seeing me for the first time in a very long time. "So," she said, carefully. "Lena." I paused. Not because I was caught, there was nothing to hide anymore, but because I recognized that tone. The calm before the storm voice she used in meetings, when she was about to get someone while making it look like a friendly conversation. I wiped my hands, set the towel down, and met her eyes. "Yes. Lena." She gave a slow nod, chewing on the name like it tasted wrong in her mouth. "Is it serious?" she asked, arms crossed, leaning against the edge of the counter like she needed it for balance. I took my time answering. "It's not about that." "Then what's it about?" I looked at her. Really looked. "It's about the fact that she sees me. She respects me. And not because I fit into her expectations, but because I don't." Isla flinched. Barely. But I saw it. For a moment, she looked down. Then her voice changed, lower, colder. "Do you even remember what I used to say about her? That she didn't care. That she was lazy. That she lacked depth." "I remember. And now, this is the woman you choose." Her voice cracked, just slightly. I could have taken the bait. Could have gotten defensive, could have said something cruel, something she wouldn't recover from. But I didn't. Because I finally understood. This wasn't about Lena. This was about Isla losing to someone she'd once dismissed as insignificant. Forgettable. A nobody. And now that nobody had become a mirror Isla couldn't stand to look into, because it reflected something she couldn't deny, she was no longer the most important woman in the room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. "I didn't choose Lena to hurt you," I said. "But I can't pretend it doesn't mean something that the woman you used to look down on, sees value in me you stopped acknowledging years ago." Her eyes welled up, not with sadness, not yet, but with something worse. Humiliation. It's a strange thing, watching someone powerful realize their grip has slipped. Isla, the one who'd always been 5 moves ahead, was now playing catch-up. And not because I'd outplayed her. But because I'd stopped playing altogether. She walked into the living room and sat on the arm of the couch, staring out the window, her jaw tight. "You really think this girl sees you?" she whispered. "She's 26, Alden. She's still figuring out what wine she likes. She's also not trying to redesign me," I said quietly. "That's the difference." We sat in silence for a long time. The streetlights flickered on. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. The world kept moving, but inside that room, something had frozen in her. Eventually, she stood. "I thought I was giving us a new option," she said, her voice distant. "I thought if we could just take the pressure off, we'd breathe again." "No," I replied. "You thought if you set the rules, I'd still play by them." She didn't answer. Her fingers toyed with the strap of her purse. Her mouth was tight, her eyes strangely wide. Like a storm was gathering just behind her gaze, but she didn't know who to aim it at anymore. Then she said the one thing I didn't expect. "I can't compete with her." And for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered all the times I did try to compete for space, for affection, for the right to just be in my own marriage. And how every time, I'd been met with silence or strategy. Now she was the one unraveling. And I was still. I stepped closer, not to comfort her, but to make sure she understood. "You're not supposed to compete. That's the point. This isn't about her being better than you. It's about me finally realizing I don't need to be smaller to keep someone else feeling big." Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, but nothing came. She just stood there. Not angry. Not powerful. Just quiet. And for the first time in our marriage, I saw something in Isla that had never been there before. Doubt. Real, trembling, human doubt. Not the kind that invites pity, but the kind that signals a foundation cracking from within. Because she hadn't lost me to someone younger. She'd lost me to someone kinder. And in her world, that was the one threat she'd never accounted for. That night, the apartment felt different. Not tense, not explosive. Just slow. Still. Like the breath before a song begins. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, thumbing through an old book I'd stopped pretending to enjoy years ago. Isla knocked once before stepping inside. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing an oversized t-shirt I hadn't seen in a while, one of mine, maybe. The soft fabric hung just past her thighs, wrinkled, warm from the dryer. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on me. "Can we talk?" I nodded. She walked in, her movements quieter than usual. She didn't take the armchair like she used to when we had talks. She sat beside me on the bed. Not touching. Not crowding. Just near. "I've been thinking," she said after a pause. "About everything. About how we got here." I didn't interrupt. She looked down at her hands, twisting the fabric of the shirt around her finger. "There was a time I used to love watching you read," she said softly. "The way you'd get completely lost in something. You never needed to prove anything to anyone. I envied that." I turned toward her slightly, unsure where she was going with this. "I think," she continued, "I stopped seeing the beauty in quiet things. In you." I didn't respond. I didn't know how. Then, in a voice so fragile it barely reached me, she whispered, "Do you ever think about the beginning?" I did. More than I liked to admit. The way she used to steal my fries, even though she swore she didn't want any. The way she'd curl up next to me during storms, her fingers tracing circles on my chest as if my skin was the only map she needed. Sunday mornings in bed, laughing at nothing. Her head on my shoulder as the world blurred away. She turned to me now, eyes glossy. "I miss us, Alden." I didn't say I did too, but I didn't pull away when she leaned in. Her lips touched mine, soft, uncertain, searching. And for a moment, the years melted. For a moment, it was the two of us again, before the Cold War, before the silence, before the loneliness built its house between us. Her hand moved to my neck, fingers trembling slightly. I responded. Slowly, deliberately. We kissed like people remembering. Not just the rhythm of each other's mouths, but the language of what used to live between us. That night, we didn't speak much. Touched like people afraid to admit how much they'd missed the feeling. We moved through the shadows of something we used to know by heart. And for a few hours, it was beautiful. Not perfect. Not redemptive. But real. Afterward, we lay in the dark, her head on my chest. My arm around her waist like old times. She breathed slow, steady. I stared at the ceiling, heart full and aching all at once. I wanted it to be enough. I wanted it to mean what it used to. But something inside me wouldn't settle. Because no matter how familiar her skin felt, there was still distance in her eyes when she looked away. There was still strategy beneath her softness, like she was pulling a thread she hoped would stitch us back together without addressing the tear. And I wasn't sure I could go backward. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Just once. A soft vibration, but it echoed like a bell in the quiet. Isla didn't stir. I reached over and checked the screen. "Lena, hey, are you free tomorrow? I've been thinking about you." My breath caught. It wasn't a dramatic message. No hearts. No confessions. Just a line from someone who meant it. Someone who didn't speak to win. Who didn't press to prove anything. Just wanted to see me. I sat up slowly, careful not to wake Isla, and walked to the bathroom. Closed the door. Looked at my reflection under the harsh fluorescent light. I should have wanted to text her back and say, "Not tonight." I should have felt guilt, or doubt, or something. But I didn't. Because Lena didn't feel like an escape. She felt like a mirror, one that didn't ask me to pretend. I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, and then I typed, "Me, yeah. I'd like that." I set the phone down and leaned against the sink, the weight of the night pressing hard against my ribs. Maybe Isla and I had shared something real once. Maybe there was still something tender buried under all the years and silence. But what we had now wasn't love. It was memory. And memory can't hold a future. We sat on the roof of her building, our legs dangling over the edge like kids pretending the world couldn't reach us. The city was quiet in the way only late evenings allow, no horns, no sirens, just the occasional hum of distant life and the rustle of wind playing with Lena's hair. She tilted her head toward me, pulling the sleeves of her cardigan over her knuckles like she always did when she got shy. "You've been quiet," she said. "Everything okay?" I nodded, though my chest felt like it had too much in it to be called okay. We hadn't talked about what happened with Isla. Not directly. Lena wasn't the kind of person who pried, not because she didn't care, but because she respected the space between someone's silence and their truth. "I keep thinking," I said slowly, "that freedom would feel like a finish line. That once I crossed it, everything would make sense." She looked at me, waiting. "But now that I'm here, I don't think it's about arriving anywhere. It's about letting go of where I thought I had to stay." Lena smiled softly. "You don't owe anyone your stillness, Alden." And just like that, the air shifted. A weight I hadn't even named slipped off my shoulders. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic. But it was real. And it was enough. We sat there for another hour, talking about books, music, why she hated the way people fake laughed in meetings. And I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. Not to charm. Not to defuse. Just because the sound came from somewhere that had finally healed. I walked her to her door, kissed her goodnight. No urgency. No pressure. Just connection. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel torn anymore. I felt whole. The next evening, I was sitting across from Lena in a small Italian restaurant we both liked, soft lighting, clinking glasses, the faint sound of Ella Fitzgerald playing through the speakers, when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't reach for it right away. But when I did, I saw her name. Isla. Can we talk? Just us. Tonight, please. I stared at the screen, heart calm. Lena must have seen something shift in my face. Is everything all right? I met her eyes, steady. Yeah. Just something I need to finish. She smiled gently. Then go finish it. Isla was already there when I arrived. Our old place. The one I used to call home. She'd booked a table. Same restaurant we'd celebrated anniversaries in. The same booth. Same candle in the center. I should have seen the symbolism coming. She looked beautiful. Familiar. Almost like the version of her I used to reach for before everything turned quiet. When I sat down, she gave a soft smile, the kind she used to use when she wanted something without asking for it outright. I didn't know if you'd come, she said. I did, I replied. She looked at me for a long time before speaking again. I made mistakes, she said. Big ones. I pushed you away. I controlled things because I was scared. And when you started pulling back, I panicked. I thought I could keep everything on track if I just held on tighter. I didn't interrupt. I don't want to pretend anymore, she whispered, voice cracking. I just want you. The real you. Not the version I tried to shape. Just you. Her eyes welled with something real. For the first time, I saw the girl I married, not the strategist, not the dominant force, just Isla. Tired. Fragile. Honest. And for a second, something in me wavered. Because I remembered. I remembered our first road trip, when we ran out of gas and sat under the stars for hours talking about dreams that felt so close you could touch them. I remembered the way she danced in the kitchen when she thought I wasn't looking. The way her fingers always found mine in the dark. But then I remembered everything else. How my silence became her fuel. How I shrank so she could rise. How she handed me freedom, not as a gift, but as a test. How it only meant something when I finally took it without asking. And I knew. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope. Isla looked confused. What's this? I slid it across the table gently. A key. To a new place. I moved out last week. Her breath caught. I'm not yours anymore, I said softly. You didn't lose me, Isla. You lost control. And I found something I didn't even realize I was missing. She stared at me, glassy-eyed, lips trembling. Please, don't do this. But I was already standing. You were right about one thing, I said. We stopped seeing each other. But the part you missed was, I didn't vanish. I just got quiet. And now. I smiled gently. I'm done being quiet. She didn't follow me. Didn't beg. Didn't scream. She just sat there, surrounded by soft candlelight and memory. Outside, the air was cool, crisp. The city felt lighter somehow. I stepped onto the sidewalk, and there she was. Lena. No words. Just presence. She reached out, and I took her hand. Our fingers laced naturally, without pressure or performance. And we walked. Not toward anything, but away from everything that no longer held us. In the stillness, I found the sentence that had been forming for months. I didn't win anything. I just stopped fighting for a place I was never meant to fit.